is occupied by Monegasque Charles Leclerc on our Grand Prix, while David Forêt closes the third row on his CRG. Tension is pretty high when the pilots are deployed onto the grid. At the start, Ardigo is cold as ice, and darting away, he takes the lead ahead of the Monegasque Charles Leclerc, Max Verstappen, Felice Etienne, Paolo De Conto, and David Forêt. During the first of 20 laps, Marco Ardigo is so pumped that he manages to get a couple of tenths of advantage over his rivals, including Max Verstappen, who is hell-bent on getting the second position from Leclerc. During the first lap, two of the drivers, Patrick Hayek and Roberto Toninelli, have a collision and are forced to abandon the match. Ardigo, in the meantime, is faster than light. This is a figure of speech, since this scenario is physically impossible. When the second lap begins, Max Verstappen starts looking for trajectories to overtake his most direct opponent. Even if the overtake seems hard to realize, the speed and grit of the Dutch push Leclerc hard to outperform himself. And so the gap between Ardigo and Leclerc is halved, going from 0.6 of a second to 3. The first known podium positions are occupied by Paolo De Conto, 4th, David Forêt, and Felice Etienne. The overtake of the Flying Dutchman arrives when the third lap begins. A sketchy turn by Leclerc hands over the keys of the second position to Max. The overtake of the Flying Dutchman arrives when the third lap begins. A sketchy turn by Leclerc hands over the keys of the second position to Max. The Dutch, however, does not seem to be content and enters the wake of Ardigo's Tony Kart, where he starts to provoke his adversary into a reaction which might give the Dutch a possibility of breaching his defenses. Ardigo is not able to escape. Behind him, Max Verstappen seems able to keep his pace and at the same time to actively seek an attack trajectory. At the beginning of the fourth lap, the three highest positions are very close, but among them, Verstappen seems to have the sharpest edge. And this cutting edge is demonstrated at the beginning of the fifth lap, when he surgically overtakes Ardigo, who is not able to retaliate and succumbs to the wrath of the Dutch. Everyone expects Verstappen to open a gap and win by himself, but instead, Marco Ardigo attacks again, trying to surprise the Dutch. Behind them, the long line of opponents is led by Leclerc, third, Paolo De Conto, locked in a struggle with Davide Forêt, in fourth and fifth position respectively, the English Lennox Lamb, Mirko Torsellini, and Felice Etienne. Top four drivers remain compact, so close that they seem to touch. Max Verstappen feels Ardigo's presence. The Dutch champion turns around and sees him ready to attack, so there is nothing he can do but step up the pace of the race. But in doing so, he is relentlessly copied by Ardigo, Leclerc, Forêt, which has overtaken De Conto, then Lennox Lamb, Torsellini, and Ben Hanley. Then, halfway through the race, Max Verstappen decides that it's time to get serious, and further increases his speed. This is where his opponents start to cringe. Behind him, Marco Ardigo fails to respond efficiently, and at the end of lap number 10, the advantage of Max Verstappen is in the order of 0.7 of a second. Verstappen's advantage begins to rise inexorably, while behind, Ardigo begins faltering. Even Leclerc seems to give in, so much that the Monegasque is threateningly approached by Davide Forêt and Lennox Lamb from its shining new fifth location. Witnessing Verstappen's driving skill is a life experience. The Dutch pilot seemed like he was unable to get Ardigo off his back, but now he gains tenths of a second every lap. During lap 11, the gap is about 1.5 seconds, almost unbridgeable, while Marco Ardigo must look behind his shoulder from possible attacks coming from the group of pursuers led by Leclerc, followed by Davide Forêt and Lennox Lamb. At the beginning of lap number 12, the Monegasque Charles Leclerc sinks his teeth into the juicy meat of Ardigo's overtake, who slips back into third position. Leclerc's attempts to bridge the gap with Verstappen, though, are in vain. Behind him, the fight for the fourth place rages, with the English Lennox Lamb who successfully attacks Davide Foré after Marco Ardigo has been overtaken. In the meantime, the standard bearer of Tony Kart manages to get back in Leclerc's wake, proving that his head is still cool enough to allow him to fight for the second step of the podium. Victory is now unreachable, over 2 seconds away, which is the amount of time that Max has put between his opponents and him from the 10th lap onwards. At the beginning of the 14th lap, Lennox Lamb is still fighting and struggling for that second place, followed closely by Davide Foré, Paolo De Conto, Mirko Torsellini and Bas Lammers in 8th place. In the 15th lap, positions are shuffled when Ardigo gets in second position by chumping Leclerc. But a few bends later, Lennox Lamb steals the second position, followed by the Monegasque and by Marco Ardigo, who slicks back into fourth position. It's a very exciting and spectacular stage of the race, where Lennox Lamb and Leclerc engage in a white-hot duel, favoring Max Verstappen, who increases his advantage to more than 3 seconds. The only undecided podium positions are second and third. Lennox Lamb and Leclerc are at each other's throat, while Ardigo, after having risked losing his fourth position, seems to be able to get back in the fray for a third placement. Behind Ardigo, we can find Paolo De Conto, Bas Lammers, Mirko Torsellini, Ben Hanley, all of them eligible candidates for the podium. With 2 laps to go, Leclerc passes Lennox Lamb, taking the second place, while Marco Ardigo loses positions, slipping behind in 8th place. On the last lap, Max Verstappen has plenty of time to enjoy his first well-deserved title of world champion, while behind him, the final sprint for second place is won by Charles Leclerc for only 60 milliseconds of Lennox Lamb. On the podium, the new KZ1 world champion, Max Verstappen, who receives the official crowning. This bright young lad is now both European and world champion in the same category.
Yeah, I think this weekend was really hard from the beginning because everybody was so close and everybody worked really hard for this race because we had a long break for KZ. So everybody was with the top chassis, the top engines completely on the maximum they have. So it was, I think, one of the most competitive races. But then to win in the final like that, I think is just amazing. Yeah, of course, he's really happy because I won also with his engine. So I think it's just perfect combination.
Second placement for the Monegasque Charles Leclerc, third for the English Jordan Lennox Lamb. And so, the tale of the Flying Dutchman is spun